Well, jeepers! You're listening to Smash or Pass.
Hi everyone, welcome to another video on the JayBee and Milly channel. We are as always joined by Rhianna.
Hello.
And Tore.
Hi.
And today we have the absolute pleasure of speaking with Ed Scharlach.
Hi.
So we are so excited to be speaking with you today. I mean, you've done so many incredible things, including your work on What's New Scooby Doo and the Loch Ness Monster, which was one of my favorite mummies, as well as Scooby Doo in Where's My Mummy. So many things that we're so excited to be getting into.
Yeah. I know your taste.
Definitely. It's just we've grown up on these things and we still love them after all this time. And I guess kicking off on the What's New Scooby-Doo era of things, how familiar were you with the Scooby-Doo franchise prior to working on What's New Scooby-Doo?
Well, it's a good question. Actually, I was not very familiar with it. I knew there was a show called Scooby Doo. There was a dog. It had something to do with mysteries, and that was about it. But when I was hired to write and produce on this show, What's New Scooby-Doo, I quickly learned, and I was hired with two other people writers who I didn't know before we wound up working together, George Doty and Jim Krieg, and they quickly educated me into the world of Scooby-Doo.
Okay, well, that's great. And so, like you say, it was kind of, you know, you came across as more through working on the project. So in regards to that, whilst you were working on it, was there ever a member of the gang that you favoured, that you enjoyed writing for more, or just as a character that stood out to you?
Well, I always enjoyed writing for Shaggy because I'm a comedy writer and he was the funniest, although every character had some humor, especially Scooby, of course. But Shaggy was really fun. And Daphne, we had a whole new Daphne in the version we did, where she became more of a clever detective and was able to, it really inspired us to get her into scrapes that she could get out of, to get the gang into scrapes that she could help them get out of. She became a bright, a clever character in our version. And so I think those were my two favorite characters of the gang that I wrote for. Whoever at the end would say, and we would have, if it weren't for you meddling kids, whoever said that at the end of each episode, I like that person.
So you were able to work on What's New Scooby-Doo as the producer, a writer, and a story editor. So kind of how did you start working on the series? Well,
I had spent over 40 years writing for television, comedy mostly, some drama hours, and never animation, although animation was always a passion of mine. So I wound up with an agent towards the end of my career, Melissa Reed, who really got me and could see there are things that I loved that I hadn't been writing for so far, and she got me into those things. And there was a position for this revival of Scooby-Doo, What's New Scooby-Doo, and she helped channel me into that job, and I was so delighted. Got to write for anime. Well, at that point, I'd been writing for various animation shows for about 5 years. Toward the the last part of my writing career at that point, I was writing for the Wild Thornberrys and a new version of the Jetsons and some other animated shows, but nothing was as lovely and fun and funny as Scooby.
Oh wow, that's so interesting. And you know, we're so glad that you got to work on Scooby-Doo because, as Milly said, What's New Scooby-Doo and the Loch Ness Monster are personal favorites of mine too. And wonderful. I feel like we've watched it so many times. And we've spoken to quite a few people, and they have different, they get given different directions from the studio. And we're wondering, did you have a specific direction that you wanted to take your version of Scooby, or was it more you had to cater to what the studio wanted?
No, they were very happy with the direction we wanted to take it in. We wanted two things. One was we wanted the mysteries to be more sophisticated and really mysteries, so you can't just guess them right away. And it would give the story, make the stories better, more of a challenge for the gang to solve them. And number two is we wanted to make the humor a little more sophisticated. I'd spent a lot of years writing for some of the best comedy performers like Robin Williams and Dean Martin and others. And so we wanted to bring the quality of humor, raise it a level. And I think we were successful on both fronts.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many episodes that I'm thinking that stand out to me. I mean, the whole of that lineup is just incredible. I can imagine that it's like a series that has stuck with me throughout the years. You know, it was like a highlight of coming back from school every day and turning on What's New Scooby Doo, and it was just amazing. And I guess in terms of like the producing side of things, from like, you know, A to Z, what was your role as a producer? Like, what type of work did it entail on the series?
All right, my role as a producer has always been from the writer's standpoint. In other words, in charge of the writing. Is rarely the producer who decides, you know, hires the people that make the costumes and the music and all the other things. I was strictly focused on the writing. And in this case, I was hired with George Doty and Jim Krieg. So three of us were producing. We'd oversee the development of the stories, of all the stories, including, of course, the ones we would write ourselves, and the scripts. And occasionally we would have input on the other creative levels if they tied into the writing.
So with that in mind, I know that you wrote 3D Destruction, which is one of my favorite episodes with the dinosaur. When you were overseeing the kind of the whole story of all of the episodes of the series, did you find a premise and go, I would like to write this episode? Or did you write an episode and it was slotted into the schedule of the series?
I came up with stories. Everything, all the scripts ever on any show starts with the kernel of a good story. And sometimes you work harder and longer on the story than you do on the script itself. So I came up with stories. The ones that were approved by the studio and the network were the ones that I would move forward on. And they would decide the order of what order they would be aired. But it would also approve and give me a few notes. I would get some notes from my collaborators and then forge ahead writing the script.
That's incredible. And I would love to touch on a little bit more. I know you were kind of talking about the transformation of Daphne throughout this series. And of course, part of that was the incredible return of DeLisle voicing Daphne. So was this something you were aware of when you started to write the script? Was it done with her in mind, or?
No, it was with Daphne in mind, and the type of Daphne that we pictured, that for the What's New Scooby Doo version of Daphne. I was delighted to see how good Gray was, but every one of those cast members was superb, and they not only great in of themselves, but how they interacted with each other just made magic and inspired us to write even better, because we were collaborating with these wonderful actors, including Gray.
Well, I think just the adaptation of Daphne was honestly incredible, because it's been transformed from this saying of there goes danger prone Daphne to Daphne being able to stand up for herself, and kind of proving a few people wrong in a lot of ways as well. So was this a direction that, you know, you'd consciously taken? Was it something that the studios wanted to develop on, or was it just kind of how things transpired?
No, I think it was all of our intent, and to make the show a little more intelligent. Yes, Daphne still could be danger prone because it helped develop the story, but she was also a very sharp detective. She would figure out how to get them out of situations that seemed to be impossible to get out of. And was a show called MacGyver where the lead character did that. So we would say, now Daphne MacGyver's the gang out of, how does she do that, out of that perilous situation? And they were all danger prone at that point.
So to get a little bit more into some of the episodes, so you wrote The Big Scare and The Big Easy alongside George and Jim. So kind of what were the differences in writing with a team versus like just writing the episodes yourself? And did you have any like behind the scenes agreements or disagreements that would arise from working in like a team writing?
First of all, no disagreements. We collaborated really well and helped each other, basically inspired each other. We're still good friends to this day. We have wonderful lunches and reminisce about our days at Scooby. And but the way to answer your question, we would work out the stories together sometimes. And in this case, I think with Big Scare and the Big Easy was a good example of how we worked out the stories together. Then whatever part of it would either write our own script based on the story we worked out together, or write out a section of the script that we agreed upon. And then when the script was finished, we would look at it and do the finishing touches together on a project like that particular script. It was a fun and creative and constructive collaboration, which my people say, what were your favorite shows to work on or your favorite jobs? And my answer always is where I really enjoyed being with the people I worked with, because you're with them 5 or 6 days a week for many, many hours. And if they're fun and enjoyable and you get along well, that makes a great job. I think in any field, probably that would be the case.
That seems like a really unique experience, and probably why What's New has lasted so long is because everyone had a great collaborative environment, it sounds like. I'm sure that's very rare in the projects you've worked on.
Well, no, I fortunately have been on most things I've done have the collaborative environment. It's hard to say. The collaborative environments have been delightful, and I've worked on a lot of shows with a partner, and that's always been good. Or I can think of just scarce couple of situations where it wasn't so delightful, but I've just been very lucky to have been in situations like that all through my 45-year writing career, especially including What's New Scooby Doo.
So in the episode Safari So Goody that you wrote, the Che song Hatari Safari is featured. So these guys had the pleasure of speaking to Rich Dickerson, who worked on that song. But to what extent was the chase music required to really match the tone of the episode, or vice versa?
I can't answer that really. That would be an answer for Rich and the music department. It wasn't a consideration at all in writing the script.
Oh, okay.
One note related to Safari So Goody, which is a pun. I thought we're doing an episode in Africa, and I came up with the title that was I love puns, Safari So Goody. Thought I was so clever. A few years later, I'm reading an article, magazine article about Sir Winston Churchill, and it turns out in the 1950s, he also loved puns, and in the 1950s, he came up with Safari So Goody. So I'm very proud to say that at least in that one joke, my mind was in the same path as Sir Winston Churchill.
Great minds, great minds.
Yeah, definitely. Great minds think alike. And, What's New Scooby Doo, there's so many stories that were told and we all love them. There's not a single episode that stands out to be worse than any of the others because they're all just so good. And we can only just start to imagine what story concepts were potentially thought of for the series that ended up being scrapped. So do you possibly remember any of them?
I don't. I think anything we launched into was done. I don't remember anything being scrapped, and it's fortunate, I guess, but I think we were all on the same wavelength, and it didn't get launched unless it was going to go. And so it's a good question, but I'm sorry that
No, that's okay. I'm really glad that nothing was scrapped, because if there was a different story that could be told, it'd be, can we please have some more episodes Warner Brothers, because we'd want to see them. And it sounds like you really did have such a great time working on What's New Scooby-Doo. So do you potentially have a favorite memory of working on it?
Well, just again, it's in line with working, the people you work with, making a good job. Bonding with George and Jim, and with them creating a productive work situation and great friendships that have lasted now for 20 years.
That's incredible to hear. And I guess a bit more like geared towards the show. I don't suppose you have a favorite episode at all, do you?
Well, there was the one called the Block-Long Hong Kong Terror.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a show about Chinese New Year, and the block-long, paper dragon that is typical of those celebrations comes alive and becomes the monster in this episode. And the reason why it's a favorite is this episode premise was thought up by my then 5-year-old son, Rob. Then at that point he was Robbie. And he said, "Daddy, those paper dragons, why couldn't one be a monster on Scooby-Doo?" And I said, "It's great." He's still a good writer all these years later. And I said, "It's a great idea." And I pitched it and we went ahead with it and it became an episode. And unfortunately, he was too young to join the Writers Guild, but it's my favorite episode because my little boy came up with the premise and the monster.
Wow. That is honestly so amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. I don't think I'm going to be able to watch the episode the same way now. That's so cool. Could you imagine that? That is wonderful. Thank you. And I mean, like you say, you put it into context there. It's been quite a while, and one of the reasons why we've been doing this project is to celebrate the 20th anniversary of What's New Scooby-Doo, which I believe is the 14th of September this year. So what does it kind of feel like to be part of a show that's lasted the test of time for so long and people still love 20 years later?
It's wonderful. First of all, I was quite surprised to hear people tell me my kid is watching What's New Scooby-Doo and they see it on Netflix here, and as opposed to other incarnations of Scooby-Doo. And the other thing that interests me in that regard is I wrote for a lot of very well-known shows and successful, high ratings. They are drifting into the past. Very few of them are still available and seen. But What's New Scooby-Doo keeps all different generations keep enjoying it and discovering it. So I'm so proud that I got to work on that, and I've never expected this longevity when I was working on it.
I mean, it certainly stood the test of time completely, in that there's been, still series released since that point, and yet What's New still seems to be the one that everyone comes back to, even over the newer shows. So it really, not just enjoyed by all of us here, but just by so many others as well. And I guess moving on to the movies a little bit, in Scooby-Doo and the Loch Ness Monster and Scooby-Doo and Where's My Mummy, they're quite closely linked. Everyone knows to kind of associate them with What's New Scooby-Doo, be that the outfit choices and all that kind of thing. Were they kind of was like the Loch Ness Monster off the back of the success that this show had? Is that kind of how you were brought into the projects and everything?
No, it was just again a concept, an idea that was developed with within our staff that we thought would be wonderful and hadn't been really done before in that way, at least. And it was just something that yet another good story idea that we thought would hold up for that length.
I mean, being from the UK ourselves, I think we have to say that we very much appreciate.
It's actually quite incredible. Both live action movies have tried to make a third one in the UK, and it's like they've been cursed. This is like the only Scooby UK based thing that wasn't hit with that British curse that we forgot. Or Scottish. Actually, someone Scottish listens to this. My neck's on the chopping board. I apologize.
From the UK.
Scottish.
We're just trying to claim ownership of it just because it's so amazing. Like I say, we did really, really enjoy this movie. And so can I ask kind of the origins of this? I know you said a lot of the, what's new episodes came from stories that you kind of created yourself. Was this another story or concept that you had that, say, was perhaps more of a movie length duration than an episode duration, or was it something that Warner Brothers had already kind of began to think about?
I think that they wanted to do some movie length Scooby Doos, and and this lent itself to a story which could be of that length and that depth, basically, where the episode stories just would last 20 some odd minutes. This could last longer, and I think it was agreed upon by Story Network, the studio network, and us as producer writers, as were some of the other Scoobies that were feature length. I'm not a very big fan, I'm sorry to say, of the live action ones. I just feel it's not Scooby. It's they're entertaining, but it doesn't have that certain spark that the animated ones did.
I have a controversial opinion there.
Oh, really?
So for Scooby Doo and the Loch Ness Monster, to what extent was the Scottish culture or even Scotland itself researched for the film?
I'm sorry to say very little. It was more in terms of what's a good Scooby instead of what's a good Scottish episode.
So then you did serve as creative.
We were afraid of getting anywhere near the Scottish play. So,
I mean, there was a good reference in there. That song, I used the high. There was like a play on words. I take the high road. You take the rocky road. Shaggy says, and I think that's based off like an old Scottish, isn't it?
It is. My old
song?
music teacher used to be Scottish, and she used to try and make us all sing that in our music lessons. So it was really fun to see that referenced.
I'll take the high road. You take the. I forgot what the. But I get to.
Yeah, they say the rocky road instead of the low road.
Like Rocky Road Ice Cream.
Yeah.
That.
Very cool. So you then served as creative consulting for Aloha Scooby Doo Movie. Kind of what did that entail? And did you ever get to speak with the writer, Temple Matthews?
No. I guess that I didn't confer with Temple, at least. But we, as a creative consultant, I was there for supervision and advice, and more in that regard, unless one of my colleagues worked with him, I didn't. But in that regard, once the script is finished, then we make sure that it has the tone of the other scripts on the show, since he wasn't a part of our team.
That's really interesting. And you then write the movie Scooby Doo and Where's My Mummy, which is yet another timeless movie that I feel we can all watch over and over again. And it's set in Egypt, which was very similar to the What's New Scooby Doo episode, Mummy Scares Best. And was this a coincidence, or is Egyptology a topic that compels you?
No, the episode inspired the movie, I would say. And unfortunately, I'm not very versed in Egyptology.
That's okay.
I'm
It was still amazing.
It was.
very barely versed in Californiaology, where I live. So,
So I guess moving a little bit on to the Scooby-Doo video games and on to
it
the
just seemed
future.
like a very good mystery, though. It seemed like a very good idea for a mystery story. So
That's very true.
Yeah, and the movie as well. I think it was one of the first times that it was like one of the gang that was
Yeah.
kind of behind it all. Very surprised, especially like watching this 20 odd years ago. As a kid watching it, you don't expect it to be one of them, and so it's like that first time I saw the reveal, it was definitely one of the times that stands out to me.
Well, we tried to surprise people, and occasionally it worked.
So one of your most recent works on Scooby was as a creative consultant for the game Scooby Doo and the Spooky Swamp. So what did this entail, and did you ever get to see the finished product?
It entailed learning about video games, which I am not very versed in, and how they're written, which was very interesting. It seemed like there was an infinite of possible moves that you can make with the video games, and so I thought that was very fascinating, and that was I really enjoyed learning as I wrote, and was happy that they. I tried to put some of the flavor of our show into the game. There were other considerations, of course, when it's a game, but it was a wonderful experience. I haven't really done much of that since, but it was great to be. I did 2 or 3 video games in that era, and I enjoyed doing it, but that was about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. They've not done a Scooby-Doo video game, I think, since the Spooky Swamp, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And since then, there's been like 3 generations of consoles, from the Wii U, the Nintendo Switch, the new Xboxes. It's probably about time that they should do another Scooby-Doo video game, but
Probably.
we'll have to wait and see. And I guess to kind of wrap things up, my question would be, do you have any like current ventures or projects that you're working on? You know, I can't help but notice your book is in the background. I was trying to get it in time for this. It's taken a while in the UK. I'm not sure how easy it is, but it's, from the previews that I did see, it is fantastic.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, it's my book. It's called Starring. It's what I just finished it a few months ago, and it's a project I'm very proud of, because it's basically a memoir, but the premise of the book, I was fortunate enough to have crossed paths with many very famous people through my life in various ways, mostly through writing, but in other ways, growing up in Beverly Hills with my family, etc. And I've got lots of stories that I would tell all the time about well-known people, and then eventually people around me said, well, you ought to put those into a book. So during the pandemic, I wrote this book, and I think it turned out really wonderfully. I think the stories, everybody will recognize the people that I was fortunate enough to come in contact with, that are the subject of the stories. And it's available, it can be ordered through Amazon. I don't know if you guys order things through Amazon, but if it's possible to order through Amazon, I highly recommend my book, Starring, by Ed Scharlach. I'm very proud of, and I think it's very entertaining.
It does look amazing and surprising as well. Like, even though like there's a lot of people that, you know, even people that you're not too familiar with, it's so interesting because it gives such a detailed backstory about everyone. And like, we've spoken about the live action Scooby movies, and me, you know, maybe not a big fan of them, but like, you know, Freddie Prinze Sr. as well. Like, that's an interesting thing, because I've never heard anything about him prior to that. And
well, he was very successful with the show Chico and the Man that I got to write and produce briefly, and he had a tragic end. But my stories are all happy stories in here, and I talk about the pleasure of writing for him and the fun.
well, it's absolutely amazing. We're going to try and get our hands on the book. And of course, all the links to where to find the book will be linked in the description down below. And like you say, you know, we just urge everyone to read it and to buy it, because like, it just seems so interesting. And I guess that wraps things up for the day. You know, thank you so much for coming on.
I can JayBee, I can mention one other thing that I've been involved with for a lot of years, 29 years, I think now. I teach a class once a year at UCLA where I bring in current writer producers on the various TV shows that are on the air right now, and I interview them for aspiring writers.
Oh, lovely.
Well, as of about 2 years ago, for obvious reasons, it went to Zoom instead of a live class. So I'll be doing this again in December, and it's called Showrunners and Showwriters. It's a UCLA extension class, and it's available on Zoom. So we found I think that's one reason UCLA wants to continue doing it that way. People from all over the world wound up taking this class. So you'll be exposed to some really interesting people that are running the current shows that I bring in and interview. So I just give a plug to the UCLA class on Zoom, which I think is available worldwide. Will be in December.
Wow, that sounds so interesting.
Yeah.
That sounds like exactly our type of thing. And I'm sure like if people like watching writers on this show, they're gonna absolutely love hearing an expert like you talk to other writers as well. That sounds amazing. We'll definitely keep up with all of that. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, JayBee and Milly and Rhianna and Victoria. Really enjoyed visiting with you all.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
And I guess for the sake of wrapping up the podcast today, thank you so much everyone for watching this. This has been absolutely amazing. Again, you can find the starring book in the description down below and where to get that, be it Amazon or any of those links. If Tori's got any links, you can find them in the description down below. I'll get them after. And all of Rhianna's social links will be linked there as well. So thank you so much for everyone watching. And, make sure to please like, comment, and subscribe for more, and we'll see you next time.